what you can't explain. It's coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. Today we're talking about 17-year-old Australian teenager Phoebe Bishop. And this case has been heavily requested in the past few weeks, but I now finally feel like we can discuss it, even though I have to be honest and say that so much of this still does not add up. Phoebe was supposed to be heading off on the trip of a lifetime, a teenage girl in love, finally about to reunite with her high school sweetheart on the other side of the country. Phoebe Bishop had spent months saving up for this moment. She had her ticket, she had her luggage, she had a ride to the airport, but somehow, despite her excitement and preparation, Phoebe never made it onto her flight, and no one ever saw her alive again. What followed was a baffling and disturbing unraveling of events that included a house reeking of decay, reports of animal remains in that house, along with roommates that Phoebe had, who apparently had a checkered past. Sadly, this case also includes loved ones of Phoebe's, not only pleading for her safe return and for answers, but also clashing publicly, revealing what could potentially be a strained and confusing family dynamic. The version of events that we have here paints the picture of a very sensitive and lost young girl who was trying to find her way in the world. This is the story of Phoebe Bishop, a somewhat rebellious teenager who was clearly going through something. She was full of heartbreak, but also hope. And even with arrests made in her case and evidence uncovered and still being uncovered, one haunting question still remains. What actually happened to Phoebe? Well, two haunting questions, actually. What happened to her and why? It was actually very difficult trying to figure out where to start in this video, but we are going to talk about everything I know so far, and hopefully we can make sense of it together in the comments after you watch. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Midas Merge. I know we talk about some really eerie stuff on this channel, missing people, haunted woods, tragic tales, horrific true crime cases, but let's take a minute to walk into a different kind of mysterious garden because today's video is brought to you by Midas Merge, a charming puzzle game that's basically like if a fairy tale met a cozy mystery and had adorable creature babies. In Midas Merge, you join King Midas and Queen Leia on a magical mission to revive the Gardens of Gold, which have been cast into darkness by Nyx, the goddess of night. And I love a good story, okay? I love a good storyline. I love, some world building, and Midas Merge has it all. As you merge items and unlock the secrets of the garden, you'll slowly unravel the mystery that she left behind. Yes, even your games can be mysterious over here. And can we talk about the creatures for a second? Because these little guys are beyond cute. I'm obsessed with the Cappy bird. It starts as a squishy little baby capybara bird hybrid. Don't ask, just trust. And by level 3, it becomes a majestic, feathery companion, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Honestly, I would protect it with my life. There's also a tiny dragon, a fox with glowing eyes, and more creatures that I want to hug immediately. Cuteness aggression kicks in hard. The best part, Midas Merge is totally free to download. You can play offline, so if you're on a flight or you just don't have Wi-Fi, you can still play and entertain yourself, and there's no annoying ads, none. Just you, your garden, and endless merging magic. And because this game is just that good, I've got a special gift just for you. If you're one of the first 100 people to download Midas Merge using my link or QR code, you're gonna get an exclusive level 1 Mox Fox with my name on it, okay? Isn't that adorable? And since we've been talking about spooky gardens today, your fox might even show up with a slightly ghostly vibe. I genuinely love games like this. They're relaxing, super rewarding, and full of little surprises. So if you need a break from doom scrolling or want a whimsical escape between true crime deep dives, you'll love Midas Merge as much as I do. Download now using the link in my description box or scan the QR code on screen. Let's go nurture some creatures and bring light back to the Gardens of Gold. Are you guys ready? I'm ready. Download Midas Merch now. Thank you so much to Midas Merch for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Tucked away in the sugarcane belt of Queensland, Australia, Gingin is the kind of town most people pass through without a second thought. Just a speck along the Bruce Highway, it's quiet, sun-baked, and surrounded by fields that stretch out toward the horizon in every direction. There's a single main street dotted with a grocery store, a petrol station, and a pub or two, but not much else. This is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. But beneath this laid-back rural charm, Gingin can feel forgotten, remote, and isolated. In this town, nestled between Bundaberg's coastal sprawl and the dense scrubland of inland Queensland, 17-year-old Phoebe Bishop tried to carve out a life for herself. But she wasn't at home, not really. She was living with two people who were much older than her in a house that had already caught the attention of neighbors, and not for good reasons. The property on Milden Street in Gingin was falling apart and dilapidated, overgrown, cluttered, and known for loud parties and barking dogs. It stood in stark contrast to the town's sleepy exterior. Just outside, a rusted-out single-decker bus sat slouched in the yard, faded letters on the front reading, "Let it ride." And to be frank, to be completely honest with you, describing this place, this house, as cluttered or messy would be the understatement of the century. It's very difficult to understand how anyone could live in this place. I'm really trying to wrap my head around it. I'm trying to really understand how you could, walk into this place and stay for even a few minutes, much less live there and sleep there.
Stepping into Gingin's House of Hell. This is just a hint of what will confront you behind this door.
I can't prepare you enough for this.
It's where Phoebe Bishop saw out her final days. The only thing worse than the squalor is the stench.
Thank goodness.
The free-spirited 17-year-old who lived away from family was subjected to absolute filth.
It was originally our bedroom.
The landlord met his wife and started their family while living in this old Queenslander. For them, it was a place of joy, peace and comfort. For Phoebe, it brought suffering and sadness.
It's not just what you see on top, it's what's underneath as well.
In every corner of the house, there is rubbish, clothing. Items usually in cupboards litter floorboards, furniture and bench tops.
So the side is obviously one thing, but the smell, it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, the air tastes dirty and it smells just... I don't know how people can be breathing this.
Dead dogs have been removed, but their excrement hasn't been.
The feces are scattered throughout and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're on everything, under everything, they're everywhere. A rubbish dump's probably cleaner.
While we were inside,
there was a mouse just running on it.
Doors are scarred, locks snapped off.
The homeowner was renting the house to 33-year-old Tanika Bromley and her partner, 34-year-old James Wood. And I feel terrible for him, the homeowner, not James Wood, because in the pictures that he showed from when he and his wife lived there, this was clearly a beautiful home. A really beautiful, spacious, lots of natural light, really great wood and architectural design. I don't think it can ever be the same now. Some situations, some energies change people and places forever, and whatever happened in this house, I don't think there's any going back, even though the homeowner says he and his wife are going to try to fix it up and get it back out there on the rental market. Now, the homeowner also said that when Bromley and Wood applied to be renters, they ticked all the boxes that good tenants would. And Bromley, who'd put the rental in her name, she hadn't missed a payment up until 10 days before Phoebe Bishop went missing. But she was at that point in a threatening place. She was about to be evicted. She'd been getting a lot of, communication saying like you have to pay the rent or you're going to be evicted, because it looked like she paid the rent on a weekly basis. And at that point, when she was getting these notices that she was going to be evicted, Tanika Bromley pretty much cut off all contact with anyone who was trying to get her to pay the rent for this house. Tanika Bromley and James Wood reportedly moved into the house together at the end of last year, around the same time they began their relationship, and they were both in relationships prior, with James Wood moving to Gingin from Emerald after his marriage ended roughly 6 months ago. And Tanika, who was known as a local mother of two, she'd previously been married to a man named Sean Cray. So how did a 17-year-old girl even know these two significantly older people in completely different seasons of their lives than she was? And how did she end up living with them? That part is still very much unclear. It appears that Tanika Bromley had ties to Phoebe's mother, Kylie Johnson, who owned an NDIS support company called Smiley's Support Coordination. For those of you who aren't familiar with the way things work in Australia, which I wasn't, so I had to look it up, an NDIS support company refers to a business or organization that provides services and support to people who are participants in the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So basically their role, the NDIS companies, their role is to help people with disabilities achieve their goals, increase their independence, and improve their quality of life. NDIS is a government-funded program that provides funding directly to individuals with permanent and significant disabilities, and then participants in the program, the disabled individuals, can use their NDIS money to purchase support and services that help them live more independently and participate in their community. Smiley's Support Coordination would have been one of the companies that would provide this support and service, and that would include, assisting with daily activities like showering and meal prep, helping participants get involved in social, educational, and recreational activities, as well as other services more on the administrative end, such as helping participants understand and manage their NDIS plans and handling the financial and administrative side of a participant's NDIS budget. So I found the website for this company, where Kylie Johnson states that she is the mother of 5 children, 3 of whom live with varying disabilities. She also said that she and her partner, Ray, have their own family-run working cattle property, which helps them understand the needs of their rural community. And it appears that at one point, Tanika Bromley worked for Kylie Johnson's company as a caregiver. And the two had become close, with reports that Johnson was a guest at Tanika's 2018 wedding to her husband. Phoebe's cousin, Whitney Woodfield, also worked for Johnson's company and knew Tanika, and through Tanika knew James Wood. Now, friends claim that Kylie Johnson and Tanika Bromley had a falling out last year when Johnson made Tanika redundant from her position. And I kind of guessed what that meant, but I had to look it up because it's not a super common term used here, but it is used often in countries like Australia and the UK. And it basically means what you think it means, which is the person was laid off or let go because their role was no longer needed within the organization. It doesn't necessarily mean they're doing a bad job or they're not doing their job or they've done anything wrong. It just means your role here is redundant. We no longer need this role to exist in this company to keep the company running in the way that it needs to. So that kind of answers the question of how Phoebe may have known Tanika Bromley. But why was she living with this woman and her partner, especially if Kylie Johnson owned a nice family farm on the outskirts of town? Once again, the specifics of this are not super clear. But Phoebe's last social media post suggests that she probably had a strained relationship with more than one of her family members. And shortly before Phoebe went missing, she posted something on TikTok that made me really sad. And it was basically a theoretical conversation that she would have with her younger self. And this was kind of a trendy thing on social media for a while. Like, what would I tell my younger self if I could meet her? What words of wisdom would I impart upon her? But Phoebe's, it really kind of cut me to the core. She posted, quote, "I met my younger self for coffee today. She wore baggy boys' clothes, her hair down, and she was filled with piercings. I wore something girly. I wore some long pants and not too short of a shirt. My hair was tied back in a bun, only have one piercing. She sat down after giving every person in the cafe a dirty look. She ordered an iced coffee. I walked in, greeting everyone with a smile and being greeted by them. I sat down quietly and gave her a smile before I ordered myself a water. She didn't speak. She could barely look me in the eyes. Her responses were short, and so was her temper. I asked, "Are you okay?" And she replied, "Like you care." I said, "I am you." And she stopped and stared. She started to bawl as she quickly jumped across the table into my arms. She looked into my eyes, and I could see she had so many questions. I quickly told her that it's okay to ask questions. That's how you receive answers. A tear left the side of her cheek. She smiled. She asked me, "Do me and Mom get along? Did I finally make her proud?" I replied, "She will never be proud. We don't see nor talk to her, but it's better like this." She was shocked because she never thought she would give up on their relationship. "Well, do I still live at home?" I replied, "We've been in and out for years. This time we're not going back, though." She asked, "Well, what about the siblings? Won't we need them?" I looked at her as I felt my heart shatter and replied, "Oh, baby, we will always need them, but we need them to find us more than anything or anyone." She said to me in anger, "But we're just kids." I looked at her and replied, "We're 18 this year. They're all gone. They all have different lives." She looked at me and she just said, "What do we do? How do we stop time?" I just looked at her with a smile and said, "You can't stop time, baby. Time is all we have." "Hey, would you like to know something cool?" I asked. Her eyes looked worried, her face red. Anyone else would have thought she was about to punch someone, but I just held her tight and let her cry. I said, "Hey, it's okay. I know it's scary, but everything is okay." She said, "All time does is take, it never gives." I grabbed her by the chin and lightly pulled her face up. I smiled and said, "It gave you a niece." Her eyes widened, her eyes sparkled. She started to sob. She asked when she could meet her. I gave her a big hug and said, "I'll bring her next time for coffee. I really hope I meet my younger self for coffee again soon." End quote. So, yeah. Phoebe's 17 years old. Everyone is dramatic when you're 17. Everybody is feeling a lot of emotions at that age. But in my opinion, Phoebe's post is haunting, poetic, deeply revealing. On the surface, it is a creative metaphor, a fictional meeting between her present and past self. But underneath, it reads like an emotional confession. From Phoebe's words, we can really tell that she had a fractured relationship with her mother, Kylie Johnson. She will never be proud, she says of her mother, which implies that Phoebe felt her emotional needs had maybe gone unmet for some time, that nothing she ever did would be good enough. Phoebe mentions being in and out of her home, which tells us this has probably been going on for some time. And the description of her siblings, who all have different lives, and she says, "We need them to find us more than anyone or anything." That suggests to me a profound sense of abandonment and longing for a connection that Phoebe didn't feel she had. Maybe a sort of nostalgia of thinking of herself and her siblings when they were young, when they were kids, when they didn't have a care in the world other than playing together and loving each other. And now they're all grown up and they have their own lives. But Phoebe's stuck in that place between childhood and adulthood where you really don't know what your future holds. And it's not always the best thing to hold on to the past. What she wrote is incredibly reflective. Phoebe's talking to herself over time, and it illustrates a contrast between who she was, defensive and angry, and who she had become, more composed, more gentle, and honestly, perhaps more emotionally exhausted, a little bit more jaded. The younger version of Phoebe is clearly in pain and distrustful, and Phoebe holding and caring for her younger self could be symbolic of how she was trying to heal, but also, I think a quiet admission that she's still carrying some of that same pain. I get the distinct impression that Phoebe Bishop felt she was forced to grow up too fast, but despite her sorrow, there is a moment of light in her words when she tells her younger self that time gave them a niece. This single line shifts the entire energy of the piece. It's the only gift time has given her, the one flicker of innocence and hope in an otherwise very painful narrative. It also shows, I believe, that despite her disillusionment with family, Phoebe still believed in love, protection, and second chances. Phoebe's post is a powerful reflection of a girl who had been wounded by her past and was trying, however shakily, to believe in her future a future. It is poetic, it's raw, it's devastating in a very relatable way, by the way. Anybody who's ever been a 17-year-old girl, me, we can completely feel this and understand it. She seems wise beyond her years, but still vulnerable and hopeful in a way that only someone very young and deeply hurt can be. So we can sort of get a vibe on how Phoebe felt about her mother, Kylie Johnson. But what about Phoebe's father? To be honest with you, I could not find any mention of him anywhere. It doesn't appear that he was in her life at all. There is one mention that Phoebe makes, sort of her father. It's a social media repost that she made on May 13th, just 2 days before she went missing. And this post said, quote, "When I die, get my dad to lower my coffin so he can let me down one last time," end quote. I mean, there's not a lot of room for interpretation here. I think the message is pretty clear, loud and clear. Phoebe feels abandoned and let down and betrayed by her father, who, once again, it does not appear that this man was in her life, at least not in a substantial way. I cannot find anything about him anywhere. And as far as I can tell, Phoebe did not feel that she could live with her family. And for a short time, she was homeless, living in her car. And then Tanika Bromley and James Wood took her in, giving her a roof over her head, I guess, but not the kind of roof you would want, not the kind of home you would want to live in, not the kind of home you would want your teenage daughter to live in. Now, the amount of time that Phoebe had been living in that house on Milden Street in Gingin is pretty unclear as well. A neighbor, Sherry Laughlin, told the Daily Mail Australia that Phoebe had been living there anytime between a few weeks to a few months. Laughlin also said that after Bromley and Wood had moved in, the property was beautiful and, well kept and well maintained, but it became more and more cluttered with garbage as time went on. And she said living next door to the couple had been a horrible experience because she had to deal with constant noise from parties. She said there was always dogs barking and stuff, and obviously just the general way the house was kept inside and out. You wouldn't want to live next door to that. You wouldn't. I mean, you saw in the video of the inside of the house when they were just standing there and talking, they saw a mouse run by. So it's this place is disgusting. It's dirty, full of germs, full of rodents. Not really someplace you'd want to live next door to. So the week before Phoebe disappeared, this neighbor, Laughlin, had made a complaint to the RSPCA about hearing a dog always howling inside the house. And it appeared that there was a lot of dogs living there at any given time. James Wood had a dog that he kind of brought with him everywhere, but there seemed to be a lot of dogs there. And it also seems that Phoebe was well aware of the level of squalor she was living in because text she exchanged with a friend on May 12th showed her desire to get out of there as soon as possible. Like I said in the intro, Phoebe was planning a trip to Perth to visit her boyfriend and high school sweetheart. Now, this boyfriend, has been given a few different names in media reports, but recently a couple articles came out where his father actually spoke out and kind of gave personal details about his son and his relationship with Phoebe. And in those articles, this boy is referred to and called Levi. So that's what we're going to call him here because that's apparently what his father wanted to call him, even if that's not his real name. So Levi's father, Rick, told the Daily Mail Australia that he had to move his family to Western Australia after his wife passed away in a car accident on New Year's Eve in 2020. So Levi, who was Phoebe's high school sweetheart, obviously used to live in the same town, in the same area as Phoebe, but then Levi's mother died in a tragic car accident, New Year's Eve 2020. And Rick said that it was too hard to continue living in Queensland because every day his 6 children would ride the school bus, which would go past the exact location of the car accident. And obviously this served as a constant reminder of the loss of their beautiful mother. That's what Rick called her, that he said his kids had lost their beautiful mom. And Rick also talked about how close the relationship between his son and Phoebe Bishop was, saying, quote, They would video chat all night, every night, falling asleep, and then they would tell each other who was sleep talking the next day. It was a bit cute, end quote. Phoebe had spent months saving up so that she could purchase a plane ticket to Perth in Western Australia, and she and Levi were both looking forward to a camping trip on the South Coast. Rick said, quote, Levi had bought Phoebe a Canon camera worth $1,000 because she wanted to get into photography. He had planned a trip to Esperance in Western Australia, camping on the beach with Phoebe, end quote. So when Phoebe chatted with her friend on May 12th, she mentioned that she'd been doing well. She was trying to focus on good things. And she said, quote, I take off to Western Australia in 3 days. Get out of this shit home for a bit. So that will be good. Just packing at the moment, end quote. So clearly Phoebe was like, yeah, this house that I'm living in, it's bad. It's real bad. I don't want to be here. I don't have a lot of options. I don't have a lot of money. Actually, one of the clerks at a nearby grocery store said he would see Phoebe all the time, and she would come in and she never had money. Okay, so this was an IGA supermarket worker, and they spoke to the Daily Mail and said that Phoebe visited the store often, looking, quote, worse for wear with no money, end quote. This worker also said, quote, why aren't questions being asked about what happened to that poor child 10 weeks before this? Where were her parents? End quote. So this worker is asking, before Phoebe disappeared, why wasn't anybody worried about her then? And the staffer, who was described as being visibly angry about the situation, said that Phoebe looked like, quote, no one owned her, end quote. She was desperate for food, often shortchanged them to the point where the employees at this IGA grocery store would sort of have to pay for her. And this worker at this IGA said, quote, people in this country have to prove they can look after animals or reptiles, but not children. This town should be standing still, but it's not. It should be crawling with people, but it's not. I've seen her parents, but had no idea she belonged to them until after. She didn't look like she belonged to anyone, end quote. So, like I said, this 17-year-old girl, this is how people are seeing her in her area of Gingin. And they're kind of like, what the heck's going on? Why are you always coming in here looking kind of, rough? Why don't you ever have any money? Who's taking care of you? So Phoebe told her friend that she planned to be in Perth for 10 days, but there is evidence that she was actually hoping to not have to return home at all. And that brings us to the morning of May 15th, 2025, when Phoebe was reportedly dropped off near the Bundaberg airport by her housemates Tanika Bromley and James Wood. At 8:30 a.m. on that morning, Phoebe called her boyfriend Levi just minutes before she was scheduled to check in for her flight. But she never did check in for that flight. And hours later, when Levi was expecting to see Phoebe get off her plane in Perth and greet him, she was nowhere to be found. She wasn't answering calls because her cell phone had been shut down right after she called Levi, and no one could contact her. The following day, May 16th, Phoebe Bishop was officially reported missing, and her mother, Kylie Johnson, took to social media to make her first of many pleas to the public for information and help. Quote, my heart is breaking, and so are those of her siblings, her family, our friends. We are lost at what to do next. If you knew Phoebe, you would know that she is free-spirited and loves hard. She is loyal to the core and cutthroat. She would never leave her family without contact, especially this week. She would never not contact us at this emotional time, end quote. And Johnson would explain that this emotional time she was referring to was due to Phoebe marking the anniversaries of the deaths of a friend and some family members that week that she kind of went missing. But Kylie Johnson was also very clear that she did not believe her daughter had run away or that she was missing of her own free will. Kylie also mentioned that Phoebe's bank account had not been touched since Wednesday, May 14th, which was unusual because she said her daughter spent money like it was water. Now, of course, one of the first things law enforcement did in their investigation was to speak to the last people who had seen Phoebe, her housemates, James Wood and Tanika Bromley. Wood and Bromley told police that they had dropped Phoebe off near the airport with her luggage, and we don't know exactly what their official statement was yet. I'm sure that this will all come out in time, but the following month, James Wood would give an exclusive interview to the Daily Mail Australia, and here are his version of events of the morning of May 15th, 2025, and I can only assume that what James Wood told the Daily Mail Australia is probably similar to what he told the police because If he had drastically changed up his story with the Daily Mail, obviously that would look weird to the police, and they might suspect him more than they already were at that time. Wood said that Phoebe had been excited for days about the visit to see her boyfriend, but she was also nervous and on edge. She was stressed about what to pack, what to wear, and making her flight on time. Wood told the Daily Mail, quote, "She wanted to get up at 5 a.m., but I said I wasn't waking up that early. It's not that far. Then she slept through her alarm, and when she got up, she was furious. She gets like that sometimes, and usually we can calm her down, but she was escalating, and then she smashed the TV. After that, she started shouting about not having anything to wear, and she was so worked up about seeing her boyfriend for the first time, and she wanted to look good. And I get it. She's a teenager, and she thinks he may be the love of her life, so I understand. I grabbed some new gray, brand new trackies I had, and I threw them to her and said, 'Wear these.' And at first she said she didn't want to take them as they were mine, but then she said okay and put them on." End quote. First things first, let's talk about what James Wood said when he was like, "I wasn't waking up at 5 a.m. The airport's not that far from the house. It's actually about 40 minutes, a 40-minute drive from the house on Milden Street to the airport where Phoebe was flying out of. So I certainly wouldn't say the distance was short. My airport is only about 20 minutes from where I live, and I always leave hours early just in case. You never know what you're going to encounter. Secondly, when reports of Phoebe Bishop being missing first emerged, she was described as being last seen wearing a green tank top and gray sweatpants. So I would surmise that the description of what Phoebe was wearing that morning did come from James Wood and Tanika Bromley, and he's saying that he gave Phoebe his sweatpants to wear and that she put them on. Those are the gray trackies that he's talking about. So James Wood said also that emotional outbursts were not unusual for Phoebe, but these outbursts had become more frequent in the weeks leading up to her trip. He stated, quote, "She does have a temper, but she's not a bad kid. She's actually a great kid. She is kind and smart and has good manners, but she was living with us because she couldn't live at home anymore. There were too many fights, too much had gone on, and she's just a kid. If I had a little sister and all she had was her car to live in, then I would want someone to help her. I had known her for almost a year when she moved in with us 4 months ago, and Tanika worked with her as a carer, so they knew each other well." End quote. So James Wood is saying that Phoebe's been living there for about 4 months. He gave this interview to the Daily Mail in June, which means Phoebe would have moved in sometime around February of 2025. He also says, hey, Tanika and Phoebe worked as carers together, so they knew each other well. Okay, that's kind of just solidifying what we already talked about with Tanika Bromley working for Phoebe's mother's NDIS company. James Wood said that although they got a late start that morning, they still had plenty of time to make Phoebe's flight, which in this interview he claims left at 10 a.m., but all media reports, including from law enforcement and Phoebe's family, state the flight would be leaving at 8:30 a.m. So while Phoebe got ready, James Wood claims he ran to a nearby IGA convenience store to grab some energy drinks, and he was back at the house by 8 a.m. He then told the Daily Mail that they got Phoebe's duffel bag into Tanika Bromley's car, which was a 2011 silver Hyundai iX35 hatchback, along with James Wood's dog into the car, and then they left for the airport with Tanika Bromley driving and Phoebe in the back seat. I want to point out something, though, about the wording that James Wood used when talking about getting Phoebe and his dog and Phoebe's luggage into the car. He described Phoebe's luggage as a duffel bag, which was, quote, almost the size of her, unquote, which I find to be an interesting way to word that statement. James Wood said that within minutes of leaving the house, Phoebe called her boyfriend Levi to let him know she was on her way. This is the last phone call that Phoebe made, which took place at 8:30 a.m. Now, when the Daily Mail spoke to Levi about this call, he claimed that all he could hear was shouting during the call, stating, quote, "They were both yelling at her and I couldn't really hear her," end quote. I once again assume that when Levi is referring to the people yelling or shouting at Phoebe, he's talking about Tanika Bromley and James Wood, who were the other occupants of the vehicle. I doubt it was James Wood's dog yelling and shouting at Phoebe Bishop. Now, James Wood has claimed This is not true. No one was shouting. They were not shouting at Phoebe, but Phoebe was still on edge and stressed about missing her flight, as well as being concerned that she hadn't had enough time at home to do her makeup because they woke up late. So James Wood said, quote, "We just wanted to get her checked in and thought if we can just get her there, she'll calm down. Tanika grabbed her makeup bag next to her and passed it back and told her to take anything she needed. Her plane was stopping in Brisbane, and we told her that the airport had everything she needed and she can take her time and do the makeup in the toilets. But she wanted to look nice for the first flight and wouldn't let it go." End quote. James Wood claimed that there was an argument going on, mainly driven by Phoebe's stress and her lashing out. And as they approached Airport Drive, the argument was still going on. So Airport Drive is less than a mile from the main terminal in Bundaberg Airport. This is a really small airport. There's only one terminal for both arrivals and departures. And Airport Drive is kind of the road leading up to the airport, hence its name. And this is where James Wood claims that he and Tanika stopped the car and pulled over so they could give Phoebe a few minutes to calm down. He said, quote, "We wanted to give her 5 minutes, give her her own space to do what she needed to do. We walked to the end. It was maybe 5 minutes, maybe it was 3 minutes, or maybe it was 8. But that's about how long we were gone." End quote. And yes, when someone is very stressed about missing their flight, to the point where they're apparently like yelling and starting an argument in the car, stopping the car and walking away from it anywhere between 3 to 8 minutes, that's definitely going to be the secret recipe to get them to relax and calm down. It's not at all going to escalate things more, especially when you're definitely running late, because the flight took off at 8:30. The airport was a 40-minute drive from the house on Milton Street to the actual terminal. And James Wood said he got back from getting energy drinks at 8 o'clock, which means you're missing that flight, okay? You're 15 minutes away from the airport when that flight's supposed to be leaving, if you didn't even get back from getting energy drinks until 8 a.m. James Wood said that he and Tanika Bromley were away from the car for 5 minutes tops, right? Maybe 8, could be 8. And when they got back, they saw that Phoebe and her luggage were gone. Now, they assumed that Phoebe had walked the rest of the way to the terminal. Of course, with a duffel bag the size of her, that would be very easy to do. If I was Phoebe, I would not have walked the rest of the way to the terminal. If I wanted to get away from these people, I would have just put the car in drive and gone. But so James Wood says that he and Tanika drove towards the airport to see if they could, pick her up on the way and bring her the rest of the way. But he said they didn't see Phoebe anywhere along the path to the airport. Wood said this was odd because, quote, "You wouldn't miss her carrying that thing. If you drove past her and saw her, you'd notice," end quote. Carrying that thing, he means her large duffel bag, apparently, which still hasn't been found to this day. We don't know where Phoebe's luggage is. So when they got to the airport, Wood said that he and Tanika sat outside the terminal for quite a while, but they didn't see Phoebe and they didn't go inside. He said, quote, "I said to Tanika, if I go in, it will just escalate things again. But she said if she went in, it would look like we were parenting her," end quote. Wood says they then checked the surrounding roads, worried that Phoebe might have gone in a different direction and got lost. And he said, quote, "We drove around and as far as we thought she could have made it, and then drove a bit further in case," end quote. So this is an important piece of the story, and I'm going to tell you why. Obviously, police pulled CCTV footage from the airport and the surrounding areas. There was no video footage of Phoebe Bishop ever arriving to the airport, ever entering the airport, ever going to the terminal, nothing. But around 10:30 a.m., there was surveillance video of Tanika Bromley's car. And the car was seen near a place called Goodnight Scrub National Park, which, by the way, is nowhere near the Bundaberg Airport. The park is more than an hour southwest of Bundaberg and almost 40 minutes southwest of the house on Milton Street in Gingin. And it is my opinion that the only reason James Wood mentioned this part of the story, driving around looking for Phoebe, going further and further out when they couldn't find her, that was because it had already been publicized by that time that Tanika's car was seen in that place on that day. And I guess he wanted to try and get ahead of it and figure out a way where he could explain why they would have been in that location that was nowhere near their house, nowhere near the airport, when they claimed they were looking for Phoebe and trying to figure out where she was. And maybe that's why he said earlier in the statement that he thought her flight left at like 10:30, because that would make sense why they were still looking for Phoebe, as opposed to if her flight left at 8:30, why 2 hours later would you be all the way out there? Like, how could Phoebe have gotten out there? How could she have gotten that far? You have no reason, absolutely no reason to be there if you claim you're looking for Phoebe. So on May 17th, the day after Phoebe was reported missing, James Wood had a texting conversation with a friend who had sent him a message the previous night at 9:45 p.m. And the friend basically asked, how are you doing? How is everything going? And Wood didn't respond until the following morning at 6:18 a.m. when he said, quote, "Yeah, been better, darls, how about you?" End quote. The friend asked if there was any word on Phoebe Bishop, and Wood said, quote, "No, nothing at the moment, but we are just printing up more flyers to go around and stick up everywhere and keep searching and hope she makes contact with someone, End quote. The friend told James Wood that they were keeping their fingers crossed and asked if there was any possibility that CCTV footage would have captured Phoebe's movements, telling James Wood surely the airport had CCTV cameras. And Wood replied, quote, "I don't know, but how's this? Because I was one of the last people to see her alive. Cops basically asked me if I did her in or hurt her. I was like, WTF. So yeah, that's nice to know that purely because I'm a male and look the way I do." End quote. I have so much to say about this, but I won't. I will reserve that opinion until the end of this video. But, basically James Wood saying he looks the way he does. I don't know exactly what he means by that. Does he mean because he's a man? Does he mean because he's an older man who not only lives with a 17-year-old girl, but refers to her as his friend, his buddy, his mate? Because that has nothing to do with the way he looks. That's just weird in general. You're a 34-year-old man living with a 17-year-old girl who you refer to and apparently see as a friend. It's not because of the way you look. I don't know what he means by that, because he's a man, because I don't know. But Wood also put a call out for help on his social media accounts that day, writing, quote, "Any little bit of information can help. Please, if you know something, please contact her family. If you know where she is and can give her family a legit address to bring her home or make contact with her, you can have my fishing boat as a reward. 15-foot trolley tinny with trailer and all. It's not much, but it's yours if you know where she is. And please, homie, if you see this, please just contact one of us and let us know you're okay." End quote. Now, at this point, I was beyond suspicious, because even though the text message exchange between James Wood and his friend, that wasn't leaked until much later, I felt this social media plea was a bit extreme. Like, he was doing too much, who wants your boat, man? Like, if anybody has information, no one's going to give you a call and be like, I did know where Phoebe was. I was scared to say anything, but man, that boat really, that rusted out old boat, it put me over the edge. I need it now. Let me tell you everything I know. It felt like it was performative, demonstrative. Like, let me show you I'm trying to do something. It was just like he was trying too hard. So over the next several days, the mystery began to unravel little by little. As the days passed, police conducted land searches along Bundaberg's Airport Drive and its surrounding areas, but they did not find any trace of Phoebe or her belongings. On May 21st, officials spoke about the case and declared that Phoebe's disappearance was considered suspicious.
Police have now deemed this investigation as suspicious, and it's out of character for her not to make any contact with anyone. We also hold concerns as she has not checked in as she was required to do.
Do police believe that Phoebe is still alive?
Police are holding all options open. We're not focusing in one direction in relation to it. We are certainly hopeful that she's still alive.
Now, by this time, police had already seized Tanika Bromley's 2011 Hyundai, and during a search of the vehicle, they found a shortened firearm and 2 replica handguns, as well as some ammunition. Police also sealed off Bromley and Wood's Gingin property on Milton Street, and officers in forensic gear could be seen going in and out of the house, where it was reported they found more ammunition. Now, as it turns out, at the time of Phoebe's disappearance, Tanika Bromley was already on parole for a previous infraction. On February 24th, 2025, Tanika had been pulled over on the Capricorn Highway in Emerald, and during that traffic stop, the police had found a sawn-off shotgun and a flick knife. So a flick knife, once again, you can probably figure out what that means, but it's also known as a switchblade. And in nearly every Australian state and territory, it is illegal to possess or carry one. A shortened or sawn-off shotgun is also treated as a prohibited weapon in the country, and possession of one is usually treated very harshly because shortened shotguns are easier to hide and aim in close quarters, like a car. So Let's summarize this quickly. Tanika Bromley had a shortened shotgun in February, a sawn-off shotgun. She was arrested for that. And then again, when police searched her car after Phoebe's disappearance, they found another one. Now, both Bromley's car and the house on Milton Street were declared crime scenes by the police. A former friend of James Wood and Tanika Bromley spoke to the Daily Mail and said that she lived near them and she'd known James Wood since childhood when he'd been a quiet boy who was homeschooled by his parents. This person also claimed that she'd cut off all contact with James Wood because she didn't like how he was treating his dogs. And she also said that although she and Tanika had become close, she had put some distance between them as well because of an incident that had happened a few months before Phoebe's disappearance. She claimed that she and Tanika were sitting in Tanika's car when Tanika reached under the seat and pulled out a sawn-off shotgun that she had stowed away there. And the person said, quote, "She just laughed and said, 'Don't worry about it, babe. It's for self-protection,' end quote." Now, we are going to come back to these charges, these weapons charges, in a moment, but as the news of this broke, Tanika's brother, Sean, also came forward, saying that he and his family have had serious concerns about the welfare of the people living in the Milton Street house, and they'd even gone to the police about their concerns many times prior to Phoebe's disappearance. Sean said, quote, "It's about time I say something. I'm ashamed my family's name is now getting dragged through the mud because of one particular person, especially considering how many times those two have been reported to authorities, welfare, and the Animal Protection Service. I even contacted the media by email and had even attached a photo of her court charges and no one did a thing," end quote. Sean said that the family had been worried about his nephews, Tanika's sons, due to everything he had been hearing and what the boys had gone through. He did not elaborate on this. After Phoebe had been missing for over a week, her mother, Kylie Johnson, appealed to the public again for any information that might help bring her daughter home, saying, quote, "I've always called her my wild gypsy banshee. I've told everyone since Fee's birth that she's the one I always expected to call me from overseas, saying, 'Hey, mumsy mate, I'm in Amsterdam, checking in. You can't tame Fee's spirit, empathy, or fight for life. She's sassy, feisty, and loves harder than anyone I've ever met. Fee loves beyond comprehension and is loyal to her siblings. Fee just loved life. Music blaring, she'd say, 'Come on, mumsy, let's dance.' Hanging with her boys, even though they all saw her as the little sister to protect, her friends always knew they would get the truth and then some if she had an opinion. Fee is the sunflower in a field full of wildflowers. She is an essential part of our lives and we need her home. We need to hear her music, feel her hugs, and hear her voice. Phoebe would never not touch base with the people she loves. She would never go this long without contacting someone or anyone. We are appealing to anyone who may have heard from Phoebe or anyone who has information about where she may be to please contact police," end quote. On May 23rd, police announced that they had discovered an item of potential interest in a creek in the Goodnight Scrub National Park. Although they did not specify what they had found, they did conduct more searches of the park, including land, water, and aerial searches with cadaver dogs and drones. On May 25th, the search effort was widened to cover more area, and homicide officers were brought in to assist. The following day, May 26th, police expanded their search again and later announced that they had recovered several items potentially linked to the investigation into Phoebe's disappearance. Although they did not specify what these items were, they did say that the items had been sent to a forensic lab for further testing. And then in a shocking turn of events, law enforcement announced that they believed evidence had been moved from the park before they began their search there Friday. That same day, Tanika Bromley appeared in the Bundaberg Magistrates Court via video link for her weapons charges. Now, Tanika's legal aid lawyer, Alexandra Sanders, told the judge that Bromley had a very limited criminal history. She was caring for 2 children, including one living with a disability as part of a shared custody agreement, and Phoebe Bishop's disappearance should not affect whether or not Tanika was allowed to get bail. Sanders said that the sawed-off shotgun found in Bromley's Honda was not operable, so it wasn't a weapon that was able to be used, and in reply, Vicki Kennedy Grills, for the prosecution, she pointed out that there had been an increase in replica weapons, saying, quote, "The way they're fashioned, they don't look like firearms, but they are incredibly lethal. It is a matter that the community would be outraged by people driving around with sawn-off firearms, especially home-fashioned ones, made to hide their true purpose," end quote. Now, we learned later during this proceeding that Tanika Bromley was essentially homeless. They said she'd been moved out of the house into the bus outside by James Wood at the time of Phoebe's disappearance. And this is important. We're going to come back to it in just a moment, so put a pin in it. The judge, or the magistrate, as they're called in Australia, he said he would consider the time between Tanika's court appearances as well as the care needs of her children, as far as like how often she would be needed to come in and how much they would need from her. But the magistrate also pointed out that Tanika seemed to have a, quote, unhealthy interest in short firearms, end quote. The magistrate also said that Tanika was a domestic violence victim, and he did not believe she was the prime mover in procuring firearms, stating, quote, "You have been subjected to coercion, violence, and duress reoccurring. I think you're a person who may not go out and procure a firearm if left to your own devices," end quote. He agreed to release Tanika on bail with some conditions. She would have to live under a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. She would have to report to her local police station 3 days a week starting the following Wednesday, and she was to have no further contact with her partner, James Wood. Obviously, at this time, since the house was declared a crime scene, neither Tanika nor James was allowed to live there, and Tanika had been staying with family nearby, while James Wood was reportedly living in the Hyundai, which had been returned to him after police searched and processed it, which is weird because they did declare it a crime scene. So it's weird that they would have returned it to him. Now, in my opinion, I'm almost wondering if they put some sort of tracking device in there to see if he would return to the scene of the crime or to see if he would return to where Phoebe Bishop's remains could have been. So let's talk about this assertion that when Phoebe Bishop went missing, Tanika Bromley was basically either moved out of the house or being moved out of the house and into the single-decker bus by James Wood. Now, we know that this bus belonged to James Wood. He had lived in it at one point, and he had once tried to sell it on Facebook Marketplace. According to an ex-girlfriend of Wood's, she'd been told that he and Tanika were having relationship issues, and they'd split up, which led to Tanika living in the bus, which by all reports was also a disgusting garbage pile when law enforcement searched it. The entry into the bus was described as being cluttered with shoes, empty bottles, and a pile of clothing. Thin curtains hung on the windows were blocking the sunlight. The interior was full of dirt, dust, and water damage, and there was a cabinet and bench top that were also littered with broken furniture, empty food packages, and clothing. Now, it is possible that the issues between Tanika and James Wood had emerged the previous February when Wood's Tinder profile, announcing that he was looking for short-term fun, was spotted by some of Tanika's friends. One friend said, quote, "Everyone had been telling Tanika he was cheating. When her mates found his profile and he denied it, they listed it online in one of those Sis, Is This Your Man Facebook groups to see if anyone had been with him. People came forward too, but even with all that proof, she decided to stay with him," end quote. So was James Wood the one that the magistrate was referring to when he said that Tanika was not the driving force behind the firearms and that she was the victim of domestic violence? I'm not sure, but I would, if you asked me to make a decision about it one way or the other, I would say probably yes. That's exactly who the magistrate was talking about. But on top of that, James Wood is undoubtedly a suspicious and odd character. There's something about him that's not right. He's not right. So let's talk more about him and what he was doing during the multi-week search for Phoebe Bishop, besides trying to pawn off his old rusted boat as some valued reward for her return. It appears as if James Wood was brought in to talk to police multiple times. He was arrested once, but then released. And when the Hyundai was also released, he began living in it. And he wasn't just living in the car, though. It seemed he had taken certain measures to disguise the vehicle. The Monday after police released it back to James Wood, the car was spotted by a local who noticed that the original number plate, which had read 414EW3, had been taped over and painted so that the new number plate read 474BW8. And the original plate had been a Queensland registration, but this had also been altered to now read NSW. So on top of that, the Hyundai symbol had been modified and changed to look like a Toyota symbol. And it's all very much like fifth grade project kind of work. But still, I guess if it was just a quick look and you weren't looking too close, you might believe that it was a real plate and a real Toyota symbol. But if you looked for more than, 1.5 seconds, you'd realize oh, what is this, some paper mache license plate? What the hell's going on here? So Wood's driving around in this car, but he's making it or trying to make it look like a different car. But that wasn't successful because on May 29th, Wood was confronted by an irate local woman who saw him sleeping in the driver's seat of the car under a tree in a local Gingin park. And this woman woke James Wood up by poking him with a beach umbrella through the open window. And then she started like waving her hands and screaming, "He's here, he's hiding here." And then James Wood like put that car into drive and pulled away. So this woman screamed, "Justice for Phoebe," as the car pulled off. And she later claimed that she believed she'd seen a dead dog in the car. I do not ever endorse or encourage anybody to do these things. People are considered innocent until they're found guilty in a court of law or by a jury of their peers. And I agree, James Wood, definitely a suspicious character, definitely shady, definitely gross. But I do not encourage you to go around looking for these people who, you probably believe are dangerous if they did what you think that they did, and prodding them with beach umbrellas, and then making claims that you see dead dogs in their car because the media had really built that part of the story up, that dead dogs were found in James Wood and Tanika Bromley's house. But then a short time later, James Wood's car was spotted again, this time in the drive-thru of a Hungry Jack's, and a live dog was seen in the back passenger seat as he left the parking lot. So obviously he's trying to remain hidden. He's probably getting a lot of heat, probably getting a lot of harassment. Why would you stay in Gingin then, I guess? You're not living in a house, you're living in a car. You could technically be a citizen of anywhere. Why are you staying in Gingin where the heat is so intense at that point? But remember, it was reported that there were dead dogs found in the house on Milden Street. Reports varied as to how many dogs were found. Official reports said 4, but some people, like neighbors and stuff, were saying it was up to 11, maybe even more sometimes. And from day one, James Wood has been steadfast in saying that he had not done anything to Phoebe. He had not hurt Phoebe. He didn't know where she was. And even though we don't know exactly what he told police during his multiple interviews, we do have some insight into his state of mind and some stories he may have told law enforcement, which have been revealed through leaked text messages. And these text messages are between James Wood and a friend. I don't know if it's the same friend he was talking to before, but the person did end up leaking these texts to the media once it became more and more apparent that James Wood was definitely involved, allegedly, in my opinion. So the friend had texted Wood asking, "How is everything going?" And Wood replied, quote, "These fucking coppers are in a witch hunt to see me and T burn at the stake, all because we were the last to see her, but turns out 4 fucking days ago, people came out stating they'd seen her with her luggage. Cops don't seem to really care that when she left, she took nearly $5K out of mine and T's room, but still harass us. Like, well, how could she have just gone? How hasn't she popped up on her bank statements? Because she has $5K fucking cash, me and T have been hung out to dry, been fucking witch hunted for Fee's disappearance, and now they want to charge us with fucking homicide. If the cops have their way, they'll save some money on court fees because neither me or T will live to see court. We've been hunted for the last week and the cops don't give a fuck. They just keep pulling shit in broad daylight, stirring it up. It's like they're hell-bent to blame someone and they have nothing, so they just decided, well, you two drove her to Bundaberg, so you two will do. We'll just keep stirring it up until it doesn't matter, guilty or not, in the court, in the press's eyes and the public. They've got the win and achieved something." End quote. So this is interesting. James Wood says Phoebe took $5,000 from him and from T, who is Tanika, obviously. If you didn't know that, when he's talking about me and T's room, me and T are being witch hunted, he's talking about Tanika Bromley. He's saying she took $5,000 from his room and Tanika Bromley's room. This is interesting. Did he tell that to the police? Probably. Is this true? Probably not, right? This is once again him providing some random detail to sort of explain away why Phoebe's bank accounts wouldn't be used, right? Her social media was also not being used, but let's say she wanted to disappear. Let's say she wanted to go visit her boyfriend and never come back. Well, maybe she would kind of drop off social media for a while and not use her bank accounts because she doesn't want people to know where she is, even though she told people she was going to visit her boyfriend, Levi, in Perth. But regardless, she doesn't want people to know where she is, so she's going to use cash instead of her bank account. This is a detail that I believe Wood completely made up to explain why Phoebe's bank accounts were not being used. So then the friend told James Wood that if the police suspected him of doing anything, they would probably have his and Tanika's phones tapped, to which Wood replied, quote, "Yeah, probably, and good luck to them because they're wasting time and money because we didn't do anything wrong and we've cooperated at every turn. And even though at every turn, things seem to get more fucked up for me and T directly after dealing with them," end quote. Wood's friend told him that they hoped Phoebe would turn up so that this could all be over for everyone, and Wood responded, quote, "Yeah, trust me, so do we. Hell, we wouldn't even be angry about the money and jewelry she took. We couldn't give a fuck. Just want to know she's safe and would like to not be lynched in the streets for something we didn't do," end quote. Would you like to be lynched in the streets for something you did do? Anyways, jewelry now. There's $5,000 in cash taken and jewelry also taken. I don't know how in the world you would find or locate any piece of jewelry in that house, but okay. We're just adding to the texture of the narrative. She took $5,000. She took this valuable jewelry, apparently. So the friend told James Wood that only time would tell, to which Wood said back, quote, "Yep, so basically, unless she comes strolling into town whistling Dixie, me and T are fucking dead men walking," end quote. Then Wood's friend asked him about the dead dogs, the reports of the dead dogs found in his home. And the friend was like, "How did these dogs get killed?" And James Wood wrote back, quote, "They didn't get killed. There was 5 puppies out of a litter of 13 that contracted hookworm and passed before the treatment could work," end quote. Once again, I don't believe this. Maybe the puppies contracted hookworm and died before treatment could work. I don't think that you guys gave them treatment, okay? I don't. I don't think that they were ever given treatment. It doesn't look like the people who lived in the house on Milton Street, the pictures we saw, the video we saw, it doesn't look like they cared much about themselves or their well-being, much less the well-being of some newborn puppies. And that's just my opinion. Allegedly, don't come for me. Now, do I think that law enforcement was intentionally trying to, get the public to go after James Wood and Tanika Bromley? No. James Wood is like, they're doing stuff in broad daylight. What he's talking about is the cops going in and out of the house on Milton Street multiple times. When do you want them to do that? These are forensic people, they're going to need some sort of light. Would you like them to do it in the dead of night at 2:00 in the morning when no one's awake so that no one will suspect you? What kind of special treatment do you want? And secondly, this whole I'm a victim, witch hunt kind of thing, it very, very much reminds me of another T that we've talked about before, and that is Letitia Stout, who, Madon, how many times does she go on the news? I think only once or twice, but she went on the news and she was like, "My daughter's being harassed, I'm being harassed, and we haven't done anything, and we just want Gannon home, and we didn't do anything wrong. It's like, I think you protest a little too much, right? You're kind of making yourself look worse in this moment. We also have some odd things that James Wood posted on social media after Phoebe Bishop went missing, while it seems he was living in the car. Reportedly, the last week of May, Wood posted a very weird 2-minute video of him lip-syncing to the song Perfect by Ed Sheeran. It's actually incredibly cringe. And in this video, which is heavily filtered for some reason, Wood is lounging back in the driver's seat, dramatically closing his eyes and biting a silver chain that's hanging around his neck. He's putting the chain in his mouth and gnawing at it while he's saying, so weird, so weird. And when the lyrics, "listening to our favorite song," came on in the song, he looked at the camera in this very overly emotional way, tapped his heart, and then continued to sing the lyrics, quote, "I found a love to carry more than just my secrets, to carry love, to carry children of our own," end quote. So was this a message to Tanika Bromley? Was this a suggestion to her that she now carried his secrets and they were kind of in this together? I know we're separated right now. Tanika, as part of her bail conditions, cannot have any contact with James Wood. They can't talk, they can't see each other. And he's sending her a message through social media don't forget you carry my secrets, which means they're your secrets now too. I have no idea. This dude's weird. He also posted a black and white selfie with the words, "Let it never be said I'm not where I need to be on time." And this, once again, like I said, it's weird. This guy's a goofy because what does he mean? What does he mean? He claimed that Phoebe Bishop was making such a big deal about being on time for her flight that day she went missing. Could this be a reference to that? or what is it? It's something. He's sending messages. They're so cryptic. They don't really have anything to do with anything. He's definitely sending messages, but to who? Most likely Tanika Bromley. So on Wednesday, May 28th, two things happened that added some texture to the case. First, Tanika Bromley was seen visiting her local police station as part of her bail conditions. Remember, I said she had to come in Wednesdays, starting that following Wednesday, which would have been 2 days after she appeared via Zoom. And she wore a hood over her head. She's blocking her face so no one can see her. She was seen entering through the back police station entrance with 2 police officers appearing to assist her getting in and out of the station. And when waiting reporters and members of the public approached and asked her about Phoebe, she remained silent and stoic before tearing off in a car.
What happened to Phoebe, Tanika? Tanika Bromley hightails it out of the Gingin police station. The housemate of missing teenager Phoebe Bishop reporting for bail over weapons offences unrelated to the teen's disappearance.
And then a woman named Kaz Johnson appeared on Network 10's The Project and made claims about Phoebe and her family. So Kaz Johnson appears to be Phoebe's aunt and sister to Kylie Johnson, Phoebe's mom. Kaz talked about how she had received texts from Phoebe out of the blue on April 26th. Phoebe had told her aunt that her mother, Kylie, had told her to get out of the house, and she didn't really want to talk about it, though, because it was a long story.
Messages now revealed for the first time.
Up shit creek, but shit happens. I'm flying the out of here to see my boyfriend. If it goes to plan, I'm not coming back. I can't do shit anymore. I need to get out of this hellhole. I need to go, but chat soon.
Kaz did say that she had not talked to Phoebe in a while by that point, and she was worried, and she knew something must have happened because Kylie, her sister, would never stop talking to her kids or kick her kids out of her home. But this is a very interesting thing because, once again, it kind of calls into question the timeline. James Wood said that Phoebe had been living with them for about 4 months, putting her living with James Wood and Tanika Bromley is starting around February of 2025. But here, these messages are happening in April of 2025, and Phoebe's telling her aunt, my mom's asking me to leave, which would mean that she hadn't started living with Tanika and James Wood until April of 2025, which would have been, just the month before she went missing. I don't know which one is true, but even the neighbor who lived next door on Milton Street said, well, Phoebe could have been there anywhere from, months to weeks. So it seems like maybe this might have been an on-again, off-again thing. Like maybe Phoebe did move in with James Wood and Tanika Bromley in February, but then she tried to go home for a little while because she was like, I'd rather live at home and whatever issues I have there than live in Oscar the Grouch's trash heap, And then maybe if things were still bad at home, so then she moved back in with Tanika Bromley and James Wood. I don't know. But what was more shocking than those texts was what Kaz Johnson said about Phoebe and her unsettled childhood.
We understand that you and Kylie, Phoebe's mum, your sister, are currently estranged. What more can you tell us about Phoebe's life and upbringing?
Phoebe, she was always moving from Queensland to New South Wales and backwards and forwards. She was always changing schools. She had so many different stepdads in and out of her life. She never had no one that she could really speak to. And they grew up in filth. No disrespect for anyone because I grew up in housing commission, but they lived like a typical housing commission family.
So in response to this, Kylie Johnson came out and accused her sister of creating a circus with her comments. Not just the comments on the show, but on Facebook. Kaz Johnson had taken to Facebook and made some more shocking claims that Kylie was using NDIS money to pay a killer to look after Phoebe, even though Phoebe herself had no disabilities. And someone on Facebook asked Kaz about posts that Kylie had made or that Phoebe and her sister Kaylee had made that suggested that both Kaylee and Phoebe not only worked as NDIS employees, but also received payments from NDIS for disabilities. And Kaz replied, she couldn't answer this, but to her understanding, in order to be a support worker, you had to be at least 18 years of age, which at least Phoebe at that time was not. She was around 15 or 16 when this started. So it does seem there's a kind of an implication here coming from Kaz Johnson that Phoebe and her sister and or their mother may have been claiming NDIS-related income or support under false pretenses, like they were taking money for having disabilities when they didn't, or they were taking money for having disabilities while also getting paid through NDIS to be carers for people with disabilities. And it also seems as if Kaz is suggesting that Kylie was using these funds to pay Tanika Bromley and James Wood to keep Phoebe in their home. So Kylie responded to this saying, quote, "I'm sorry, but blood doesn't make you family. Showing up, being present, and unconditional makes you family. Please refrain from referencing my daughter as your family. She may be blood related, however, you know nothing about her. You state Phoebe has no disability. Where's your evidence? Where are your professional reports? Or better yet, your qualifications to state that she didn't have a disability? Oh, wait, you wouldn't know because you didn't know her," end quote. And this is just messy. We never want to see this. Someone's missing. Family members are going to be devastated enough. We do not want to see family members turning on each other. And I will say, I don't know the full story. I don't know what's going on. I do think it was a little distasteful for Kaz Johnson to come out in public on a show that was visible to the public and make claims or statements about the kind of private lives of the family of Kylie Johnson and Phoebe Bishop. Because at this point, we don't know, is that even relevant? Is it important? If it is, the police would know, but you already have a public in an uproar. If the family life of Phoebe and whatever was going on with Kylie Johnson was important, the police would more than likely already know that or have looked into that. And you already have a public that is rabid for answers right now. You know, they're going after James Wood. They're following Tanika Bromley to the police station for her probation requirements. And now they're also kind of going after Phoebe's mother, Kylie Johnson. On May 31st, Phoebe's mother, Kylie, made another public statement, this time in person on camera. And she said the investigation wouldn't be over until they found Phoebe.
Today, for the first time, Phoebe's mother described that daily anguish of not knowing, saying their lives have been changed for the worst.
I still hold hope that Phoebe will come home, but I have to consider the possibility that she also won't. In the worst case scenario, if the worst case scenario has happened, I at least need to know where she's resting. I need to know where Phoebe is.
The following day, June 1st, Kylie posted a statement online speaking out after her public plea was torn apart by individuals who took to the internet to express their belief that her statement was not genuine and to also give, I guess, their opinion on her parenting and why what had happened to Phoebe was Kylie's fault. By this time, there had already been a lot of online chatter questioning Kylie's parenting and, like I said, blaming her for where her daughter had ended up. And clearly Kylie Johnson had had enough. She wrote, quote, "People wanted a statement. They got one yesterday, but still question me as a mother. I'm sorry that I'm currently an emotional wreck trying to protect our other children from the media and the trolls, trying to continue to breathe while your world shatters around you. If anyone would like to be in this position, please step in and show me how to do this. Show me what the perfect parent looks like. Show me how to navigate this. Show me how to deal with the unknown and the uncertainty. Show me how to use perfect language and emotion in a situation that no parent ever wants to be in," end quote. I completely agree with this statement. I completely agree and support Kylie Johnson. I don't know what kind of dynamic Kylie and Phoebe had, but I do know that people blaming Kylie Johnson for Phoebe, going missing and possibly something bad happening to her. We do know by now something bad happened to her, but people blaming her for that, I don't understand. First of all, there's another parent involved here, the father. Where the hell is he? Nobody's asking that. It seems to always fall on the mother. Nobody's like, where's Phoebe's father? Why isn't he in her life? Phoebe seemed equally as upset with her father as she did with her mother. And then once again, we have to remember, she's a 17-year-old girl. This is the exact time where you rebel against your parents, where you push back, where maybe there were issues, maybe there were fights, maybe there were, clashes and differences of opinion and high emotions. But Phoebe's 17, she moved out of her house. I was 17, a little younger, when I moved out of my house, and my mother is an angel. But in those moments, I felt like the responsibilities and burdens that were being put on me were unfair for my age. I felt like I, had to kind of strike out on my own and sort of create the kind of life that I wanted, which I felt at the time was not the life that was being provided for me. I was angry at my parents who had been divorced, and I was angry for many reasons, right? I felt abandoned. I felt like everybody was too busy working and trying to keep a roof over my head to actually be a part of my life. I didn't feel like I had any guidance, and I lashed out. But I now know, as an adult with children of my own, that my mother was doing the best that she could under the circumstances as a single mother, as, you know, a woman who had to work several jobs in order to keep us all afloat. And I would not have seen that when I was 17, right? To me, what was happening was extreme and drastic, and it was unfair, and I didn't have what I needed. But now I see, like, she was doing the best she could. There was no abuse. There was no neglect. It was just life. So we have to really remember that Phoebe was 17. And what if a 17-year-old wants to leave their home and not live with their mother? What does a parent do? What can you do, right? Besides maybe know where she is and sort of try to keep in touch and things like that. But what can you do? You can't tie them to their bed. You can't lock them in the attic for the rest of their lives. You sort of have to let them go out and figure out that, you know, life's hard out there. It's not easy. And you're young and you don't really know what you're doing. You don't really know what life is about. And you have to sort of wait for them to come to that conclusion and realization on their own and hope that they come back to you more mature, more grown, more aware of what's out in the world. Unfortunately, it did not turn out that way. But I really don't think it's fair to blame Kylie Johnson for where Phoebe ended up at all. On June 4th, police called off the physical search for Phoebe Bishop, who'd been missing 3 weeks by that point. And this was the same day that James Wood sat down for that exclusive interview with the Daily Mail. And we already discussed what he told them. But what I didn't mention earlier was right before his interview ended, James Wood told the journalist that it appeared the investigation into Phoebe's disappearance had turned into a murder investigation. And he was like, I don't even know why that happened. I don't know when that happened. He said as far as he was aware, the police had been looking for his missing friend, but then they stopped looking for her and started looking at him. He claimed he was asked if he wanted to get a lawyer, but he'd declined because he had nothing to hide. Remember, he's done nothing wrong. He also claimed the police had shut down his social media because he'd been receiving over 1,000 messages. I assume he means harassing, threatening messages. And he said he had cooperated with law enforcement fully, so he wasn't sure what was going on. He said, quote, I gave them my phone. I told them everything I know. My car was declared a crime scene and then given back. Then they asked me to come in again. It got to the point where I went, no, sorry, end quote. So he's sort of admitting here that the police are continuing trying to talk to him. And at one point, he refused to cooperate. So he was cooperating, and then he stopped. He stopped cooperating. Now, shortly after he left this interview, James Wood was arrested at 11:30 a.m. in Bundaberg, and the arrest of Tanika Bromley would be right around the corner.
Marched from his cluttered caravan, James Wood realises
just listen to me.
His freedom is short-lived.
Police
seized and towed a four-wheel drive he'd been living out of. Forensic officers are analysing it for any signs of death. His girlfriend, Tanika Bromley, was also arrested at Bundaberg Police Station by detectives who tellingly called their alleged victim by her first name.
Whilst we always hoped to find Phoebe alive, our investigation as it progressed quite clearly showed us that was not going to be a viable outcome.
The accused murderers weren't brought into the courtroom where Phoebe's sister was waiting.
She was loved. She's missed dearly. 3 weeks is too long for us as a family and all of our friends. We just want a home.
We believe Phoebe was murdered and then her body was moved
to Goodnight Scrub National Park, which has previously been searched. It's where police believe her remains still are.
We are not finished with this investigation. Our focus has always been to bring Phoebe home.
And bring her home they did, because on June 6th, Phoebe's remains were found in an area near Goodnight Scrub National Park. Court documents allege that the police believe Phoebe was murdered on Airport Drive in Bundaberg and that Bromley and Wood interfered with her corpse on May 15th. And then again 2 days later, when law enforcement believes Phoebe's remains were moved from an undisclosed location to the park. Now, as this news broke, Kylie Johnson took to social media and said, quote, I didn't think my heart could break any more than it did when you went missing or when the charges were laid, but this is ripping me apart, end quote. Obviously, it is clear that the theory of law enforcement is that James Wood and Tanika Bromley murdered Phoebe Bishop, that they were responsible for all of this, her murder, her remains being moved, everything, even though no motive has been put forth yet. We don't know why. And even with these two in custody, though, the internet has continued to be highly critical of Phoebe's mother. During a vigil held by the Gingin community after Phoebe's remains were found, these criticisms continued. Now, during this vigil, many people spoke about Phoebe, including her mother and sister.
Phoebe always sung her own tune. She lived to the fullest. She loved the people that she loved to every extent of the earth. And she was 200% invested in the people that she loved. And that is what we need to hang on to and remind ourselves of every day. Phoebe, 17 years was never enough for her life. But in the short 17 years that she was with us, God, she gave us a run for our bloody money. But that's just the way Phoebe was. But she was loyal to the core to everybody she loved, respected, and valued in her life.
Kylie Johnson also spoke about Tanika Bromley, who, remember, she appears to have known closely for some time. They used to be friends. Tanika Bromley used to work for Kylie Johnson. So Kylie Johnson knows Tanika and apparently her family as well, because they all live in the same town and the same location, which is a pretty small town. I think there's just over 1,000 people living in Gingin.
I know Tanika has been charged. I know her family live within our community. And from living within our community, I expect them to receive respect, and I expect them to receive the respect that they deserve. They have not made the decisions that this woman is accused of.
So Kylie Johnson did get some heat for this, like, why are you finding it important to tell the community not to harass Tanika's family, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's stupid. Like, I think it's the right thing to do. Obviously, Tanika's family had nothing to do with what Tanika and James Wood chose to do, whatever it was they chose to do. And even Tanika's brother, Sean, came out and was like, our family does not, support this person. Our family does not condone what she was doing. We do not, take ownership of her. We have suffered, and our reputation has suffered because of this one person and their actions. So obviously, Tanika's family has sort of come out publicly against her. So I'm not sure why Kylie Johnson saying, hey, don't harass these people, leave them alone, would be such a hot take, but apparently it is. Now, what happened to Phoebe Bishop? As of now, we know that her remains have been positively identified. The police have not revealed a cause of death. If you were to ask me, how did Phoebe Bishop die? I would say she was shot. I would say that she was shot by, possibly a sawn-off shotgun in Tanika's car that she kept under the seat. A sawn-off shotgun that is specifically shortened so that it can be used in more contained spaces like a car. Now, why would Tanika Bromley and James Wood kill Phoebe Bishop? I have no idea, but I'm sure we're going to find out. I'm sure that both Tanika and James are going to plead not guilty, and this will go to trial. And we're going to kind of figure out what happened here, unless one of them turns on the other and kind of gives all of this evidence, and then the police offer the other person a deal so that it doesn't have to go to trial. But I do want you to know that even though Phoebe's remains were found after Tanika and James were arrested, they did not give police information to find Phoebe's remains. The police were able to kind of narrow down where Phoebe Bishop was based on cell phone coordinates from James Wood and Tanika Bromley. So in a way they told, but not willingly, because they are definitely going to go and pretend that they had nothing to do with this. They dropped her off on Airport Drive. They don't know where she went from them. The most convenient story ever told. We see this in case after case. I dropped her off in front of a gas station and she got in a car with some weird people. What happened to her after is not my deal. I didn't do anything. We've seen this. We see this all the time. So why do I think it happened? I don't know. There's going to be a motive, though. Are there drugs involved? Based on the living conditions of these people, I can't imagine that they were sober, that they were not under the influence of something that put them in a complete fantasy world and allowed them to ignore the absolute, apocalypse that they were living in around them. So drugs could have been involved. Do I think money was involved? No, I don't think money was involved because I don't think any of these people had money. Was there some sort of NDIS scheme where Tanika and James were being paid a stipend to keep Phoebe in their home? It's possible, but I don't think that would be a motive. We need to figure out what the motive is, but where do I think this all happened and where do I think it all went down? Well, looking at James Wood's story that he told the Daily Mail, he talks about Phoebe wanting to not be late for her flight, wanting to get up at 5 a.m. And he was like, no, I'm not getting up that early. Her waking up late because her alarm didn't go off or she missed her alarm, rushing around, going into a fit, smashing the TV. Smashing the TV is an important detail here. Why would he say it? First of all, do I believe Phoebe Bishop, the 17-year-old girl, was just so stressed out about not being able to do her makeup before she left for the airport that she smashed the TV of these people? No. Do I think that Tanika and James Wood would have been like, it's okay, Phoebe, that you smashed our TV. We're still going to drive you to the airport. Everything's fine. No, I don't. I think the TV got smashed in an altercation. And I don't think it was Phoebe who did it. Now, maybe she was thrown into it. Maybe there was some struggle happening and the TV got smashed. But I think whatever happened, whatever tension and argument or violence that led to Phoebe's death, where it started, I believe, is at that home on Milton Street, which is why the police probably classified it as a crime scene. And then there's, talks about James Wood saying he went to IGA to get energy drinks and he got back around 8 a.m. I would assume the police have already pulled CCTV from that IGA to confirm that story. I would assume they've also pulled receipts or looked at the surveillance to see what James Wood bought. Did he buy energy drinks? Did he buy one? Did he buy two? Did he buy three? Did he buy something else like cleaning products or gloves or bleach or huge garbage bags, things like that? What did he purchase at that IGA around 8 a.m. on the day that Phoebe Bishop went missing? I would be interested in knowing that because I guarantee you it wasn't energy drinks. But once again, he may have bought some energy drinks while he was there to have an alibi, and he may have felt completely safe and comfortable telling the police in the Daily Mail, like, I went there for energy drinks, because that's true, partially, right? The best liars always use a grain of truth in their lies. But I'm sure he bought something else. I'm sure he did. So I believe that the police are going to be piecing this together. They're going to be looking through electronic messages, text messages, social media messages, trying to figure out what exactly was the catalyst to Phoebe Bishop being killed by Tanika Bromley and James Wood, who are innocent until proven guilty, but who have been charged with her murder at this point, as well as, messing with the remains of a deceased person. So we know that Tanika and James are believed to be the ones who killed Phoebe. Tanika and James are also the ones who are believed to have moved her remains after she was dead. Yeah, nothing new as of now. I'm expecting it's going to take a while. I'm expecting that the police are doing a serious investigation. They're probably talking to both Tanika and James, interrogating them, trying to get them to flip on each other. And also, like I said, using investigatory tactics like going through GPS, cell phone coordinates, cell phone messages, this and that, to try and figure out exactly what happened on May 15th that led to the death of Phoebe Bishop. But that's all I have for you now. What do you think about this case? It's such a tangled web. What do you make of it? Please let me know in the comment section. Let's talk about it. But until then, like the video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you very, very soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. And I love you so much. Bye.
Would a levee don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down.